All right, so today we're diving into a pretty shadowy world, really.
Mm.
The story of Britain's secret resistance, the one they planned in case the Nazis invaded.
Fascinating period, isn't it?
It is. I mean, picture this, right? It's 1940.
France has just fallen.
The Nazis seem unstoppable, right? I mean, everyone knows about the Battle of Britain, the brave pilots and all that. But,
What if the Germans had actually landed?
yeah,
What then?
a lot of people don't realize Britain had a plan.
They did.
Oh, yeah. A multi-layered plan, far more elaborate than most realize.
So they were ready to fight back, even if the Germans got a foothold.
Absolutely. We're talking clandestine training, ordinary citizens ready to wage guerrilla warfare,
Really?
even teenagers trained as assassins.
Wow. That's pretty intense.
It is. This is a side of the war that we rarely hear about.
Okay, I am hooked. Let's uncover these details.
Absolutely.
Let's start with the big picture. Hitler, he had just conquered France. What was he thinking about Britain at that point? He actually hoped for a peace agreement.
Really?
He did. He saw Britain as, well, a kindred Aryan nation. Figured they posed no real threat, you see.
Hmm.
Get this, he even offered to let them keep their empire.
If they just stop fighting.
Exactly. His main goal was Russia. He was already looking east, you see.
And he needed to free up his resources for that, right? For that fight.
Exactly. Huge undertaking, invading Russia.
Yeah. So he thought, oh, let's just shake hands with Britain, and then it's off to conquer Russia.
Something like that. I mean, you got to remember, at that point, the British army had been pretty badly beaten up in France. Options were limited.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. But come on, I mean, surrender to Hitler. Not really Churchill style, is it?
No, definitely not. Churchill and the British people, they were made of sterner stuff.
That they were.
Yeah.
So when it became clear that Britain wasn't going to play nice,
Really nice, yeah.
what did Hitler do?
He started planning for an invasion, Operation Celian.
Operation Sealy?
The goal, land a massive force on the south coast of England, overwhelm the defenses quick as you please.
Okay, paint me a picture. Just how big are we talking here?
Huge. Massive. We're talking nearly 2,000 barges.
Barges?
Yeah. Plus hundreds of merchant ships, tugs, motorboats, all that.
For what? Just to get across the channel?
For the first wave, yeah. 9 German divisions.
Oh. So we're talking, what, tens of thousands of men?
Oh, easily. Plus vehicles, artillery, even horses. Thousands of them.
Wait, horses, hold on. I thought the German army is, all mechanized, tanks, planes, the whole bit.
Oh, they were famous for that, for sure.
Yeah.
Blitzkrieg and all that. But horses, they played a huge role in logistics. The whole war, really.
Really?
Transport, especially in areas where the vehicles struggled, rough terrain, all that.
Huh. That's fascinating.
It is, isn't it? The things you discover.
Okay, so where were they going to land, all these horses and soldiers and everything?
The plan was a stretch of coastline. From Ramsgate in Kent down to the Isle of Wight.
So prime real estate, basically.
Pretty much. They were looking at areas with historical significance. Pevensey, for example. William the
I know.
Conqueror,
Right. So going for the symbolic targets as well.
Maybe. The idea was to bypass London, at least initially, eliminate the resistance in the south, then encircle London, siege it from the west and north.
Surround them. Clever?
Risky, though, relied heavily on a few things.
Like what?
Air superiority. The Luftwaffe had to neutralize the RAF, keep those British planes from sinking the invasion fleet.
Yeah, those RAF pilots, they could really do some damage.
Absolutely. And they also needed to keep the Royal Navy at bay, much more powerful than the German Navy.
Right. Okay, so the Luftwaffe, that's where the Battle of Britain comes in, right?
Exactly. The Luftwaffe, they launched a huge air campaign. Factories, airfields, communication centers, anything they could hit.
Trying to cripple the RAF, make way for the invasion.
That's it.
But they didn't exactly account for the tenacity of the British, did they? Those pilots, they fought like demons.
They did. And their air defenses were very effective.
Radar, all that.
Exactly. Radar, a vast network of observers on the ground, all feeding back information.
So even though they were outnumbered,
They were, yeah.
the RAF, they managed to hold on.
They did. Inflicted heavy losses, too. Gave the Germans a bloody nose.
That's incredible. Really a turning point, wasn't it? The Battle of Britain, the fate of Britain, maybe even the whole war, it all came down to those few months in 1940.
It really did.
But, what really gets me is that even if they had landed, the Germans, Britain was ready to fight. in ways that most people don't even realize.
That's the fascinating part, isn't it? The British response, it went way beyond just throwing together some kind of defense force.
They were thinking ahead,
Strategically,
not just about how to stop the invasion.
about how to resist,
Even if
even if the country was occupied.
Okay, so I got to ask, tell me about those defenses. What were they planning?
Well, for starters, you had the regular army, right? Bolstered by empire forces from Canada, Australia, New Zealand.
Right, a united front
They learned a lot from what happened in France.
from the Blitzkrieg.
Exactly. They knew they had to be mobile, adaptable, couldn't let the Germans just roll through and use everything they captured
Make it hard for them.
every step of the way.
So we have the regular army, empire forces, and of course the home guard.
Ah, yes. The Home Guard.
You know, I've always thought of them as, well, kind of like Dad's army, a bunch of older guys, not really up to the task.
Well, that's a bit unfair.
Is it?
It is. Sure, at first they were a bit under-equipped. But they were rapidly armed, especially down south where the invasion was expected.
Right.
Absolutely. And they had specific training, specific tasks, some of it surprisingly vital and very, very secret.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. Secret tasks. Tell me more. What were they up to, these home guard fellas?
Well, one of their key roles, disruption. Slow the Germans down any way they could.
Hmm.
For example, manufactories. They had their own home guard units, trained to remove or destroy vital components.
So as the enemy approached.
Right. Before they could get their hands on them.
Deny them the spoils of war, huh?
Exactly. Another target, petrol stations. Home Guard commanders, they had detailed lists, every station in their area.
So they could, blow them up?
Dismantle the pumps, bury the equipment, make it very, very difficult for the Germans to refuel.
Clever. So it's all about slowing them down, disrupting their plans, making it a nightmare, basically.
That was the idea. They were learning from the Blitzkrieg, you see. How quickly the Germans could move, how they could exploit existing infrastructure resources.
Makes sense.
Mobility was key. They couldn't let the Germans just capitalize on what they captured.
Right, so he's got the regular army, the empire forces, the home guard, all playing their part. But you mentioned something earlier about secret resistance networks. That's where things get really interesting, right?
Oh, absolutely. Behind the lines, another layer of defense was being prepared. Clandestine units. Ready for a guerrilla war.
Like those auxiliary units we've talked about before. The guys operating from those hidden bunkers.
Those are the ones. Highly trained volunteers.
Yeah.
Sabotage, disrupt communications, even assassinations.
Sounds like a suicide mission, frankly.
Mhm.
Going up against a fully equipped occupying force.
In many ways, it was. They knew their chances of survival were slim, but they were expected to cause as much chaos as possible, buy time for the conventional
They
forces.
make life difficult for the Germans.
As difficult as possible.
And you mentioned collaborators earlier. I mean, were they targeting people within their own communities?
That was a crucial part of their mission. Neutralize potential collaborators. Anyone who might help the Germans.
Like out of sympathy or fear.
Could be anything.
Yeah.
Sympathy, fear, opportunism, who knows.
Mm.
But anyone who might provide supplies, information, any kind of support.
The British Union of Fascists, for example.
Them, definitely. Known sympathizers. Anyone who might be coerced into helping disrupt the German war effort from within.
Wow. Sowing seeds of doubt, fear, even among those who might be tempted to cooperate.
Make the occupation unsustainable.
That's really a different way of thinking about war, isn't it? This whole shadowy world of clandestine operations, resistance fighters.
It is, and it gets even more remarkable because the British weren't just preparing for initial resistance. They had plans in place for long-term resistance, even if Britain was fully occupied.
You're telling me they had a plan to fight back even if the whole country was under Nazi control?
They did. And that's where we enter the world of Section 7, top secret MI6 group. Utmost secrecy, dedicated to organizing and supporting a resistance network in case the worst happens.
So this wasn't just about delaying the inevitable.
No.
This was about keeping the flame of resistance alive,
Yeah,
no matter what.
that's it.
Section 7, I've heard whispers about this.
And what makes it even more fascinating, its existence was kept secret from almost everyone. MI5, the military, they didn't even know about it.
Wow.
Members sworn to absolute secrecy.
Like something out of a spy novel.
It really is. And what we're finding, it wasn't just a small operation either. Nationwide network. Tens of thousands of people, potentially.
Tens of
So
thousands?
it's mind-boggling.
So who are they recruiting for this secret army? What kind of people?
All walks of life. But one of the most surprising aspects, they actively recruited young people, teenagers even, trained them for combat roles.
Teenagers? You're kidding.
I'm not. We have accounts from people like Peter Atwater. He was just 14 years old when he was recruited, lived in a coastal town. His role, if the Germans occupied, was to be an observer, gather information on troop movements, supplies, anything he could.
So they were training kids to be spies, essentially.
You could say that. Eyes and ears of the resistance. He'd report his findings to a cell leader who had a secret radio room hidden behind a fake cupboard in his shop.
A fake cupboard?
Clever, isn't it? Then 2 women, also part of the cell, they'd transmit the information to a safe zone, probably Scotland, or maybe even to the government in exile, maybe Canada.
Incredible. These teenagers risking their lives in total secrecy, families totally unaware.
It is, and their training didn't stop at observation. Peter, he later recounted how he was taught to be a sniper by these terrifying ex-World War I NCOs.
Wow. That's chilling and inspiring at the same time. Kids preparing to do extraordinary things.
It is, and what's even more remarkable, Section 7 wasn't just training boys. They were recruiting women, too, for combat roles.
Women in combat. That's pretty radical for that era.
It was. They were trained in all sorts of things. Explosives, sabotage, even how to be honey traps.
Honey trap.
To gather information, eliminate enemy personnel, all that.
Wow. They really were preparing for a no-holds-barred kind of fight, weren't they?
They were. They knew this wouldn't be a conventional war. It would be a fight for survival. Brutal, clandestine. One incredible story comes from Jennifer Lackley. Her mother, Irene, was part of a Section 7 cell in Yorkshire. Irene was trained in explosives, sabotage, unarmed combat, all that. And years later, a pushy salesman came to their door, wouldn't let her close the door. So Irene, she used her training, fling him across the hallway.
No way.
Oh yeah, pots and pans flying everywhere. Jennifer, she was stunned. Her mother, normally quiet, gentle, suddenly transformed.
That salesman, I bet he never messed with a housewife again. But it's amazing, though, right? That training stayed with her all those years.
It's a testament to their commitment, the impact it had on their lives. And Irene's story, it's just one of many. We have accounts from other women, Priscilla Ross, for instance, trained in a hidden base under a church in Essex.
Under a church?
Molotov cocktails, railway sabotage, even assassination. It is. And what's tragic is that their service is largely gone unrecognized. Most were sworn to secrecy, never spoke about it.
Yeah.
And because the invasion never came.
They never got the recognition they deserved.
Exactly. A hidden chapter of history, full of courage, sacrifice, a willingness to fight no matter the odds.
And it's crucial that we bring these stories to light. These weren't just soldiers. They were ordinary people.
Yeah.
Doing extraordinary things.
Absolutely. And there are likely many more stories out there waiting to be uncovered. It's an ongoing process, this discovery. Every new piece of information, it helps to complete the puzzle of resistance.
Of resilience.
Yeah, they made some pretty big mistakes, actually, switching to bombing cities, hoping to break civilian morale.
The Blitz.
That's the one. But ironically, it actually gave the RAF time to regroup.
So it backfired, basically.
You could say that. Gave the British a breather.
Fascinating. It really is amazing, though, how those few months, summer of 1940, the whole war could have gone a different way.
Yeah.
Even if the Germans had managed to land.
They're in for a fight.
Yeah. Britain was ready.
Oh, yeah.
And not just in the air.
Nope. The ground defenses, the preparations, they were pretty remarkable.
So let's say the Germans did land. What happens? Who's there to meet them?
Well, for starters, you've got the regular army, right?
Of course.
Strengthened by Empire forces, Canada, Australia, New Zealand.
A real Commonwealth effort.
It was. They learned a lot from France.
From the speed of that attack. Right?
Exactly. The Blitzkrieg.
Yeah.
They realized mobility was key. Couldn't let the Germans just roll through, and use everything they captured.
It's going to make it hard for them.
Every step of the way. Disrupt, delay, deny.
Okay. And then, of course, there's the Home Guard.
The Home Guard.
I always think of them as a little kind of like Dad's Army,
A TV show.
Yeah, a bunch of older chaps, a bit out of their depth. Not exactly a crack fighting force.
Well, that's a bit unfair, really.
It did.
It is. I mean, sure, at first they were a bit under-equipped, but they were rapidly armed, especially in the southeast where the invasion was expected.
Really?
Oh yeah. And they had specific training, specific tasks. Some of it surprisingly vital
Okay, now you've got me intrigued.
and very, very secret.
Secret tasks, huh? All right, what were they doing, these home guard chaps?
Disruption. That was a key role. Slow the Germans down any way they could.
Make a nuisance of themselves, basically.
You could say that. For example, many factories, they had their own home guard units trained to, well, to remove or destroy vital components.
So if the Germans were coming,
Right, before they could get their hands on it.
deny them the spoils of war.
Precisely. Another target, petrol stations. Home guard commanders, they had detailed lists, every station in their area.
So they could what? Blow them up?
Dismantle the pumps, bury the equipment, make it as difficult as possible to refuel.
Clever.
Yeah.
So it's all about disrupting their plans, slowing them down, making it a real headache for them.
That was the thinking. They'd seen what happened in Europe, right? They learned from the Blitzkrieg.
How fast the Germans could move.
Exactly. How they exploited existing infrastructure resources.
Makes sense.
So mobility was key. Couldn't let the Germans just capitalize on what they captured.
Right. So we've got the regular army, the Empire forces, the Home Guard, all doing their bit. But you mentioned something earlier about secret resistance networks.
Ah, yes.
That's where things get really, really interesting, isn't it?
Behind the lines, there's a whole other layer of defense being prepared. Clandestine units ready for a guerrilla war,
Okay.
essentially.
I like that.
Like those auxiliary units we've talked about before. The guys operating from those hidden bunkers. Those are the ones. Highly trained volunteers. Sabotage, disrupting communications, even assassinations.
I mean, that sounds like a suicide mission, really.
Yeah.
Going up against a fully equipped occupying force.
In many ways, it was. They knew their chances of survival were slim, but they were expected to cause as much chaos as possible, buy time for the conventional forces.
Make life difficult for the Germans.
As difficult as possible.
And you mentioned collaborators earlier. Were they actually targeting people within their own communities?
That was a crucial part of their mission. Neutralize potential collaborators, anyone who might help the Germans.
Out of sympathy or fear.
Could be anything. Sympathy, fear, opportunism, who knows? But anyone who might provide supplies, information, any kind of support.
The British Union of Fascists, for example.
Them, definitely.
Yeah.
Known sympathizers.
Yeah.
Anyone who might be coerced into helping. The idea was to disrupt the German war effort from within.
Wow. Sowing seeds of doubt, fear, even among those who might be tempted to cooperate.
Make the occupation unsustainable. A real headache.
That's a whole different way of thinking about war, isn't it? This whole shadowy world of clandestine operations, resistance fighters.
It is, and it gets even more remarkable because the British, they weren't just preparing for initial resistance.
What do you mean?
They had plans in place for long-term resistance, even if Britain was fully occupied.
You're telling me they had a plan to fight back,
Yeah.
even if the whole country was under Nazi control.
They did, and that's where we enter the world of Section 7.
Section 7.
Top secret MI6 group. Utmost secrecy, dedicated to organizing and supporting a resistance network in case the worst happens.
So this wasn't just about delaying the inevitable. This
Yeah.
was about keeping the flame of resistance alive, no matter what.
That's it.
Section 7. I've heard whispers about this.
And what makes it even more fascinating, its existence was kept secret from almost everyone. MI5, the military, they didn't even know about it.
Wow.
Members sworn to absolute secrecy.
Like something out of a spy novel.
It really is. And what we're finding, it wasn't just a small operation either. Nationwide network. Tens of thousands of people, potentially.
Tens of thousands.
Mind-boggling, isn't it?
So who were they recruiting for this secret army? What kind of people?
All walks of life. But one of the most surprising aspects, they actively recruited young people, teenagers even, trained them for combat roles.
The teenagers. You're kidding.
I'm not. We have accounts from people like Peter Atwater. He was just 14 years old when he was recruited. Lived in a coastal town. His role, if the Germans occupied, was to be an observer. gather information on troop movements, supplies, anything he could.
So they were training kids to be spies,
Hmm.
essentially.
You could say that. Eyes and ears of the resistance. He'd report his findings to his cell leader, who had a secret radio room hidden behind a fake cupboard in his shop.
A fake cupboard.
Clever, isn't it? Then two women, also part of the cell, they'd transmit the information to a safe zone, probably Scotland, or maybe even to the government in exile, maybe Canada.
Incredible. These teenagers risking their lives
Ah,
in total secrecy, families totally unaware.
it is. And their training didn't stop at observation. Peter, he later recounted how he was taught to be a sniper by these terrifying ex-World War I NCOs.
Wow, that's chilling and inspiring at the same time. Kids preparing to do extraordinary things.
It is. And what's even more remarkable, Section 7 wasn't just training boys. They were recruiting women too for combat roles.
Women in combat. That's pretty radical for that era.
It was. They were trained in all sorts of things: explosives, sabotage, even how to be honey trapped,
Honey traps.
to gather information, eliminate enemy personnel, all that.
Wow, they really were preparing for a no holds barred kind of fight, weren't they?
They were. They knew this wouldn't be a conventional war. It would be a fight for survival. Brutal, clandestine. One incredible story comes from Jennifer Lackley. Her mother, Irene, was part of a Section 7 cell in Yorkshire. Irene was trained in explosives, sabotage, unarmed combat,
All of that.
all that. And years later, a pushy salesman came to their door, wouldn't let her close the door. So Irene, she used her training, flung him across the hallway.
Oh, wait.
Oh yeah, pots and pans flying everywhere. Jennifer, she was stunned. Her mother, normally quiet, gentle, suddenly transformed.
That salesman, I bet he never messed with a housewife again.
And
But it's amazing, though, right, that training stayed with her all those years.
it's a testament to their commitment, the impact it had on their lives. And Irene's story, it's just one of many. We have accounts from other women. Priscilla Ross, for instance, trained in a hidden base under a church in Essex.
Under a church.
Molotov cocktails, railway sabotage, even assassination.
Incredible.
It is. And what's tragic is that their service, it's largely gone unrecognized. Most were sworn to secrecy, never spoke about it.
Yeah.
And because the invasion never came,
They never got the recognition they deserved.
exactly, a hidden chapter of history,
Yeah.
full of courage, sacrifice, a willingness to fight no matter the odds.
And it's crucial that we bring these stories to light. These weren't just soldiers; they're ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
Absolutely. And there are likely many more stories out there waiting to be uncovered. It's an ongoing process, this discovery. Every new piece of information, it helps to complete the puzzle of resistance, of resilience.
It's amazing to me that these stories are only coming out now, decades after the war. It makes you wonder, what other secrets are still out there, hidden away, just waiting to be discovered.
It really is remarkable, and it speaks to the level of secrecy surrounding Section 7. These individuals, they were sworn to silence. Many of them, they never even told their families.
Really,
It's only now, as time passes, that people feel more comfortable sharing their stories. We're getting these glimpses into this hidden world of wartime resistance.
and it sounds like you're relying on more than just firsthand accounts to uncover these stories. What other avenues are you exploring?
Archives, we're digging through archives, looking for any official documentation, anything that might shed light on Section 7's
I
activities.
bet that's tough, finding needles in a haystack.
It is. Sadly, a lot of the documentation, especially for these clandestine operations, it was probably destroyed. Security reasons,
Makes sense.
Mm.
But still, it's got to be frustrating. Like trying to put together a puzzle, but half the pieces are missing.
Exactly. Makes you wonder what we might find if those missing pieces ever surface.
The stories they could tell, the insights we might gain.
It's tantalizing to think about. We know Section 7 was a nationwide network,
Yeah.
potentially much larger than the auxiliary units or other resistance groups. Just imagine the sheer number of people ready to risk everything, to fight for their country, even against those odds.
It's a real testament, isn't it, to the spirit of the British people. During that time, it wasn't just about keeping calm and carry on. It was about a real determination to resist.
Absolutely. And it challenges that traditional narrative, doesn't it? Of Britain standing alone, waiting for help.
They were ready to fight back.
Make the occupation as painful as possible. Make Britain a graveyard for any invading force.
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, that history is full of surprises,
Mm.
more layers to uncover, perspectives to consider, and often it's those stories of ordinary people
Ordinary things.
that really resonate.
What strikes me most about Section 7 is the selflessness. They were prepared to fight in the shadows, knowing they might never receive any recognition. Their motivation, it was pure. Love for their country, a fierce determination to protect their freedom.
A legacy that deserves to be remembered, to be honored. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Britain's secret resistance, what what are some key takeaways for our listeners? What can we learn from this remarkable chapter of history?
I think it reminds us that courage, resilience, it can be found in the most unexpected places. It challenges us to look beyond the familiar narratives, to consider the perspectives of those who operated in secrecy, whose sacrifices might have been overlooked,
hmm
forgotten.
It also highlights the importance of remembering, of honoring those who served in silence, whose stories might never have been told if not for researchers, historians.
Exactly. Their actions might not have made headlines, but their commitment, their bravery, no less significant.
Well said. Any final thoughts for our listeners? Something to ponder as they go about their day.
If this deep dive has sparked your interest, I encourage you to explore further. Talk to your older relatives, ask about their memories of that time. You never know what hidden stories might be waiting to be shared. And if you think you might have a family connection to Section 7, reach out to researcher Andy Chatterton. He's on Twitter at, at Chats1. Every piece of information, it helps to bring this fascinating, this crucial chapter of history to light.
Excellent
Hmm.
advice. And of course, be sure to subscribe to the deep dive for more explorations into the fascinating and often forgotten corners of the past. Until next time, keep diving.